What do you mean, Pope Francis? The words hung in the air for a second, quiet and fragile, then shattered into a storm of laughter. Malik Johnson felt his throat tighten as a wave of chuckles rolled through the classroom like a gust of wind. He could almost hear his own heartbeat pounding against the walls of his ribcage. Some students leaned back in their chairs, others looked at each other wide-eyed, shaking their heads like they'd just witnessed a punchline. And maybe they thought they had. Ms. Hargrove's senior civics class had been halfway through a unit on global leaders and morality in modern politics when she'd asked a simple question: who's someone alive today you deeply admire, and why? Malik didn't hesitate. He raised his hand, clear and confident. Pope Francis. The room blinked. Then the girl in the back, Brianna Lewis, Queen Bee, TikTok Queen, honor roll sarcastic, pulled out her phone under the desk with one hand and muffled a snort with the other. Wait, for real, she said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. The Pope? She had already started recording. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Malik tried to recover. Yeah, he said firmly, trying to keep his voice level. Pope Francis. Because he talks about mercy. About loving people who don't look like you, who don't think like you. I don't know, he just feels real. Another ripple of laughter. Jason Moore, the linebacker from the football team, muttered loud enough to be heard, "Man's really out here simping for the Vatican." Ms. Hargrove finally stepped in. Enough, she said, her tone flat but tired. She didn't look at Malik. Let's move on. But it had already happened. The damage was done. The bell rang 10 minutes later. Chairs scraped back, backpacks zipped, and the crowd spilled into the hall like nothing had happened. But Malik stayed sitting, his hands clenched and fists against the desk. Ms. Hargrove gave him a sideways glance as she gathered her papers. You okay, Malik? He nodded stiffly. Yeah. She hesitated, then turned away. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, his phone buzzed. And buzzed again. And again. A video was already online. Video camera, bro, really, said the Pope. I can't, skull. Captioned with crying laughing emojis and a zoomed-in slow-motion replay of Malik saying, because he talks about mercy. Brianna's voice was in the background, mocking, ladies and gentlemen, the Pope's #1 hype man. By the time Malik made it to his locker, the video had over 2,000 views. He slammed his locker door shut and tried not to make eye contact with anyone. But the whispers were impossible to ignore. Pope boy. Holy Malik. You pray to him too. Every word was a cut. Deep, invisible ones. What they didn't know, what they didn't care to know, was that Malik wasn't just fanboying. Pope Francis had been his anchor in a world that never stopped trying to drown him. The south side of Chicago didn't raise soft boys. It didn't let them believe in fairy tales. But it had taught Malik to survive. And sometimes survival meant clinging to the one person who preached love in a world dripping with hate. It had started 2 years ago. His mother was gone, somewhere in Atlanta chasing a record deal that never called back. His dad was a whisper in another state. His grandmother was the only one left keeping the lights on, both literally and spiritually. And every Sunday morning, while most of the neighborhood still slept or recovered from Saturday night, she'd prop open her Bible, pour him some coffee despite him being too young for it, and read him headlines from Catholic news service. This Pope, he's different, she'd say. He don't look at us like we're sinners for breathing. He sees us. And Malik believed it. He had read every letter, watched every clip, even printed out the Pope's message to American youth and pinned it above his bed. He wasn't Catholic. But he believed. That belief had never been tested like this. He sat alone at lunch that day, earbuds in, trying to block out the laughter from the next table. Brianna was rewatching the video with her friends, giggling like they'd just discovered comedy. Malik stared down at his tray. Half of his sandwich had gone cold, untouched. He scrolled through his phone, saw the comments piling up under the video. Homie think he's gonna get an invite to the Vatican face with tears of joy. Imagine being black and thinking the Pope cares about you LMAO. Ain't nobody praying for you, bro. He closed the app. For a moment, he thought about deleting all his accounts. Just disappearing. Then his phone buzzed with a text. It was from his grandma. Remember what I told you, baby. God don't always stop the storm, but He gives you the strength to walk through it. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he put the phone down and opened his notebook. On the top of a clean page, he wrote, "Dear Pope Francis, I don't know if you'll ever read this. But I need to tell you why you matter." That night, he stayed up late, writing. He didn't try to be fancy. He just told the truth. About how lonely it felt being the only one who saw mercy as strength. About how believing in someone who preached grace made him the punchline. About how hard it was to keep going, when even teachers looked away. And most of all, about how his faith wasn't about religion. It was about survival. He didn't know where to send the letter. He didn't care. He just folded it neatly and slid it into the back of his Bible. He'd find a way. 3 days later, Brianna uploaded another video. This time, it was a clip of Malik sitting in the library, headphones in, reading a book called Fratelli Tutti. A papal encyclical. She'd zoomed in on the cover and added the caption. At this point I'm convinced he thinks the Pope is his therapist. The video went viral. Again. But this time, something strange happened. In the comments section, buried under the usual mockery, a different kind of comment appeared. I actually respect this kid. That book changed my life too. Y'all clowning someone for having faith? That's sad. Hey bro, ignore the noise. What you're doing takes guts. Malik noticed. And he smiled. Just a little. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The old apartment on 63rd and Wentworth didn't look like much from the outside. The bricks were weathered, the front steps creaked with every footfall, and the mailbox leaned at an awkward angle like it had given up trying to stay upright. But for Malik Johnson, it was more than just home. It was a place of prayer, pain, memories, and quiet, unshakable faith. He stepped inside after school and was immediately hit by the familiar smell of cornbread and shea butter. His grandmother, Miss Laverne, stood at the stove, humming low to herself, gospel music playing softly from the radio beside the fridge. "Hey, baby," she called over her shoulder. "How was school?" Malik shrugged, tossing his backpack by the couch and sinking into the cushions. "Fine." She gave him that look, the one that saw right through every "I'm fine" he'd ever said. "Fine, huh? That the kind of fine where you want to talk, or the kind where I should just heat up your plate and keep praying in the kitchen?" He cracked a small smile. "Second one." Miss Laverne turned back to her pot, nodding. Thought so." Dinner was quiet that night. They sat at the little fold-out table tucked against the wall, eating in silence except for the occasional clink of silverware. Malik stared at his plate, pushing his greens around without really eating. "You still thinking about them kids?" she asked gently, not looking up. He didn't answer. "You know, when your mama was your age," she continued, "people used to call her Jesus Girl. Said she prayed too much, sang too loud. Said she'd never make it anywhere clinging to that Bible." Malik looked up. "Didn't she try to go to Atlanta for music?" "She did. Had a voice that made people cry. Thought maybe she'd find more than church songs to sing down there." Miss Laverne paused. "But sometimes, baby, when the world don't clap for your song, you stop singing it. Don't mean the song's wrong. Just means the world ain't ready. Malik's throat tightened. He hadn't seen his mother in 3 years. She called once every few months, her voice soft and tired, like the music had drained out of her. She believed, he said quietly. Just like me. Miss Laverne reached across the table and touched his hand. Her skin was rough from years of scrubbing floors and raising grandkids, but her touch was warm. She still does. And so do you. And don't you let anybody laugh that out of you. Malik's room was a shrine of contradictions. The walls were cracked, paint peeling at the corners, but the bookshelf overflowed with books, Baldwin, Coates, Angelou, and right in the center, a worn copy of Laudato Si, with pages bent and underlined in blue ink. Above his bed hung a single photo, Pope Francis washing the feet of African migrants. He stared at it every night before bed. Not because it was some holy relic, but because it reminded him that power didn't have to look like pride. That the most powerful people knelt for others. He reached under his pillow and pulled out the letter he'd written days earlier. The one to the Pope. Still here, he whispered to it. He wasn't sure what he expected. A miracle? A response? No. What he wanted, needed, was for someone to see him. To see a 17-year-old black kid on the South Side who still believed in something bigger than himself. Who still believed in mercy. On Saturday, Malik went with Miss Laverne to the local food pantry, like they did every other weekend. Not because they needed the food, though some weeks it helped, but because she insisted they serve. You want to talk to God, she always said, you better be ready to carry somebody else's burdens too. He helped bag groceries for older folks, stocked shelves, and loaded boxes into cars with broken windows. It was there, while organizing cans of green beans, that he met Mr. Elijah. A tall, thin man with skin like weathered leather and eyes that had clearly seen too much. He wore a ragged coat over a priest's collar that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since before Malik was born. You believe in that man? Elijah asked, pointing at the Pope's image on Malik's hoodie. Malik hesitated. Yeah. I do. Elijah looked at him for a long time. Then nodded once. Don't stop. Not even when they laugh. You know him. Knew him. Long time ago. Before I stopped believing people like us had a place in that church. Malik raised an eyebrow. What changed? Elijah gave a crooked smile. Still waiting. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small booklet. You keep this, he said, pressing it into Malik's hand. On Mercy, the title read. You read it, maybe you'll understand why your faith bothers people. Makes them nervous when you love something that didn't love you first. That night, Malik sat at his window with the booklet in hand. Rain tapped against the glass like a gentle reminder that the world outside didn't stop spinning just because your heart did. He opened the first page. Mercy is not weakness. It is the greatest strength one can show to a world that demands revenge. He read every word. Twice. And when he closed the booklet, he didn't feel smaller. He felt seen. The next morning, at the break of dawn, Malik put on his cleanest jeans, a button-up shirt, and his scuffed-up sneakers. He walked the 12 blocks to St. Ignatius Parish, even though he wasn't Catholic. He sat in the back row, quiet, eyes wide, watching the people rise and kneel. The priest spoke in a soft, tired voice. The sermon was about hope. Hope, he said, isn't believing that everything will be fine. It's believing you'll still be here when things go wrong. Malik didn't sing the hymns. Didn't know the rituals. But he prayed anyway. Let them see me, Lord. Let them see what I see. Later that week, in class, Ms. Hargrove handed out an assignment, write a personal reflection on the most powerful moment you've experienced this year. While others wrote about games and dances, Malik opened his notebook and wrote. The most powerful moment was when I realized that faith doesn't need approval. Just presence. He didn't care if Brianna saw. Didn't care if she laughed. He was done hiding. The church bells didn't ring on Sundays in Malik's neighborhood. There weren't any steeples tall enough to be heard above the gunshots, sirens, or thudding bass from passing cars. But every Sunday morning, at precisely 7:45 a.m., Miss Laverne's voice filled the apartment with something holier than bells. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Her voice wasn't what it used to be. Age had chipped away at the strength behind the notes, but what remained was pure, like smoke from incense, rising slow and sure. Malik stirred under his blanket, letting the melody wash over him before sitting up. He didn't need an alarm clock. Not when Miss Laverne had lungs and faith enough to summon him awake. He shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She was already dressed in her Sunday best, a pale lavender hat with matching gloves, a long dress that reached her ankles, and that pearl brooch she only wore for God. "You ready, sugar?" she asked, sliding a piece of toast onto his plate. "Yeah," Malik said, though he wasn't sure he meant it. Church didn't always feel like his place. He wasn't Catholic, not technically, and even the little Baptist church down the block could feel like another school hallway, full of judgment and whispered doubts. But sitting next to Miss Laverne, his hand in hers, hearing her hum along with the choir, that made it sacred. They didn't always go to a formal service. Some Sundays, they worshipped right at the kitchen table. Malik would read aloud from the Book of Psalms, and she would close her eyes, nodding along like each word reminded her why she hadn't given up on the world yet. This Sunday, though, they stayed home. "Pastor out sick," she said. "Figured God wouldn't mind us staying put." Malik didn't argue. He sat at the window with his Bible, flipping through pages with more notes than verses. Half of them were from Miss Laverne, little handwritten thoughts in the margins. The other half were his own. Quotes from Pope Francis. Lyrics from songs he loved. Sentences he wasn't sure he believed but still hoped might be true someday. He stopped on a verse he'd highlighted in green. "The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Psalm 34 verse 18. He let the word settle. Across the room, Miss Laverne sipped her tea and watched him. "You always read that one," she said. "I guess," Malik replied. "It just sounds like it's for people like us." Miss Laverne smiled, her eyes soft behind the steam of her mug. "That's 'cause it is, baby." After breakfast, Malik pulled out his notebook again. The one with the letter to Pope Francis. It had become a habit now, adding to it. Not really rewriting, just building. Like he was writing chapters of a life no one else knew he was living. Dear Pope Francis. Today I read Psalm 34 again. I think you'd like it. It talks about the broken-hearted, about being crushed. I don't know if people tell you this much, but there are a lot of us out here who feel like that every single day. We're not saints. We're not bishops. We're just kids in neighborhoods nobody visits unless something burns down. And yet, somehow, you keep saying we matter. I guess I just wanted you to know I heard you. He paused. Tapped the pen against the page. Even when no one else does, I still hear you. The afternoon passed slowly, like most Sundays did. Malik took a walk down the block, headphones in, the world tuned out. He passed boarded-up liquor stores, corner bodegas with bulletproof glass, murals of black heroes fading into brick. He stopped at a small park that barely qualified as one. A rusty swing set. A bench with chipped paint. Graffiti that someone had tried to scrub off but gave up halfway. He sat on the bench and opened the little booklet Mr. Elijah had given him, on mercy. The words weren't complicated. They didn't need to be. Mercy is not a reward for the worthy. It's a gift to the hurting. To love someone without demanding they change first, that's how you change the world. Malik closed the book and leaned back, staring up at the cloudy sky. He remembered a time when he was 8, sitting on this same bench, waiting for his dad to show up. He never did. Miss Laverne came instead, sat beside him for 2 hours without saying a word. Just held his hand. That was mercy too, he realized now. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of old copper, Malik helped Miss Laverne fold laundry. Gospel still played on the radio, now softer, slower, like a lullaby for grown-ups. "You think he'll ever read it?" she asked, nodding toward the notebook. "I don't know," Malik said. "But I think maybe someone will. And that's enough for you?" He thought for a moment. "It has to be." That night, Malik lay in bed, the letter tucked back under his pillow. He stared at the ceiling fan, its slow, steady rotation a quiet rhythm in the silence. His phone buzzed once. A message from Brianna. "You really serious about all this Pope stuff?" He stared at it. No emojis. No insults. Just curiosity. He thought about ignoring it. But something in his chest said otherwise. He typed back. "Yeah. Why?" 3 dots appeared. Then vanished. Then reappeared. "I don't get it. But, maybe that's why I can't stop thinking about it." Malik didn't respond right away. Instead, he whispered to the dark. "Let them see me, Lord. Just like I see you." And for the first time in a long time, he slept without clenching his jaw. The first time Malik was shoved against a wall by someone in a uniform, he was 11. It wasn't a full-blown arrest. No cuffs. No reading of rights. Just a rough hand on the back of his neck and the gravelly voice of a Chicago cop saying, "What are you doing around here, huh?" He was on his way to buy a loaf of bread. Now, 6 years later, that memory still lived in his bones. A kind of quiet ache that reminded him not to run, not to reach, not to make sudden movements. It was Thursday afternoon when the news broke. A black teenager, someone 2 grades below Malik, had been tackled and detained outside the school. Rumors spread fast, wildfire through the halls. He mouthed off to the school cop. No, he was just reaching for his phone. Someone said he was wearing a hoodie. That's it. By 7th period, everyone was talking. By the time Malik stepped outside after the final bell, the crowd had gathered near the flagpole. Phones out. Voices rising. Anger simmering just beneath the surface. The officer, Deputy Barnes, stood tall and defensive, hands on his belt, not his gun, but close enough. The principal was trying to mediate, throwing around words like misunderstanding and standard procedure. Malik stood at the edge of it all. Watching. And boiling. Because the kid? Jalen Marcus. He was short. Skinny. The kind of kid who wore cartoon tees and carried a trumpet case. The kind of kid who shouldn't have to fear being body slammed on school grounds. Malik clenched his fists. His heart pounded. He didn't move. Not yet. But the moment was coming. That night, he sat at his desk and stared at the Pope's photo again. What would you do if you saw injustice and the world told you to stay quiet? What if speaking up made you a target too? He picked up his pen. Dear Pope Francis. Something happened today. A boy at my school was hurt by someone who's supposed to protect us. No one's saying it outright, but we all know what this is. We know the pattern. You talk about the culture of encounter, about meeting people where they are, with compassion. But how do we meet people who already have their fists raised? Who wear badges and fear our skin before they even hear our voice? He stopped. Looked at the half-written sentence. His jaw tightened. And how do I keep believing in mercy when justice always seems to come last, if at all? The next day, Brianna approached him at his locker. She didn't have her phone out. No sarcastic grin. Just a serious expression he'd never seen on her before. "You saw what happened, right?" she asked. Malik nodded. "I'm thinking about organizing something. Like, a walkout." Malik raised an eyebrow. "You?" "I know," she said, quickly. "I clown around. I get it. But this isn't funny." He studied her face. She meant it. "I don't want it to be just noise," she continued. "I want it to mean something. And, people listen to you." He blinked. "They laugh at me." "Yeah. But they listen first. That's something." They met that night at the local youth center, a few blocks from school. The air inside smelled like old books and microwave noodles. A poster of Barack Obama still hung on the back wall, faded but defiant. Brianna brought a small group. Malik brought his courage. "I think we should make this about more than Jalen," he said after everyone sat down. "We should make it about all of us. About how we're treated. Every day." A girl named Trina nodded. "And not just by cops. By teachers. By security. Even by each other." Malik glanced at Brianna. She nodded at him. "You lead it," she said. He hesitated. "Why me?" "Because when you talk, it doesn't sound like a protest. It sounds like a prayer." By Monday, posters were up in the halls. "We walk for justice. We kneel for mercy. Friday at noon. Join us." Some students whispered in excitement. Others rolled their eyes. The principal called Malik into his office. "This isn't the time for disruption," he warned. "We're trying to keep things calm." "With all due respect," Malik said quietly, "things haven't been calm for a long time." The principal sighed. "You'll be held accountable if this gets out of hand." "I understand." But something had shifted in Malik. The fear that had always lived under his ribs was still there, but it had company now. Conviction. Friday came fast. At 11:59, the halls buzzed with nervous energy. Teachers glanced at their clocks. Students fidgeted in their seats. And then, right at noon, Malik stood up. He didn't speak. He just walked out. One by one, others followed. Trina. Brianna. Jalen, bruised but standing tall. Dozens of others. Some quiet. Some with fists raised. Some crying. By the time they reached the football field, over 100 students stood in silence. Then Malik knelt. And the rest knelt with him. No chants. No shouting. Just silence. A protest of presence. A prayer without words. From the window of the school office, the principal watched. So did Deputy Barnes. Neither spoke. That night, Malik got a DM from someone unexpected. At Vatican Media. "Hello Malik. Your story has reached us. Someone translated your letter to the Holy Father. He has read it. And he asked us to tell you, thank you for showing the world what mercy looks like." When Malik first read the message, he thought it was fake. A scam. A joke. Another way for someone to laugh at him under a different username. But the blue checkmark was real. At Vatican Media. The official Vatican Media account. He reread the message. "Your story has reached us. Someone translated your letter to the Holy Father. He has read it. And he asked us to tell you, thank you for showing the world what mercy looks like." Malik just stared at the screen. His hands were trembling. It took him a full hour to gather the courage to tell Miss Laverne. She was in the kitchen folding towels when he walked in, holding his phone like it was on fire. "Grandma," he said, voice tight. She looked up, and when she saw his face, her hands stopped moving. "What is it?" He turned the screen toward her. She squinted for a moment, then blinked. Twice. You mean to tell me, she said slowly, that the Vatican, read your letter? Malik nodded. And the Pope himself? He nodded again. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it since 1967. Then she smiled. And then she cried. By Monday, the story had exploded. Someone from the youth center had recorded the protest walkout, Malik leading the way, then kneeling in silence with the rest of the student body behind him. They'd added a voiceover from his letter, read by an anonymous speaker, paired with soft piano music and black and white footage of South Side streets. Then someone else reposted it to TikTok. And Twitter. And Instagram. And suddenly, everyone was watching. This kid knelt in silence. No yelling. No fists. Just presence. That's power. At Justice for All. A young black student writes to Pope Francis. The Pope responds. This is the world I want to live in. At Rev. J. Howard. Malik Johnson. Remember that name. At Bookboy writes. By Thursday, it had over 4 million views. At school, everything changed. Some kids still avoided him. A few teachers looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure how to interact with someone who was now being quoted in The Atlantic. But most people. They nodded. They said his name with something close to respect. Even Ms. Hargrove, who'd been mostly silent after the original classroom incident, stopped him after class. I read your letter, she said. It made me cry. Malik gave a small smile. Thank you. She hesitated. I'm sorry I didn't stop them that day. Malik looked at her for a long moment. You don't have to apologize, he said. But, you do have to keep watching. That night, Malik scrolled through hundreds of comments, DMs, and emails from strangers across the world. A priest in Ireland. A Muslim activist in Detroit. A former police officer who said he never saw mercy this clearly until now. But one message stood out. It came from Father Alejandro, a Jesuit priest who worked in the Vatican's communications office. Malik, the Holy Father would like to send you something personal. With your permission, we will ship a package to your home this week. Malik's heart skipped. He quickly texted back with Miss Laverne's mailing address. Yes, of course. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Sometimes silence is the most sacred reply, came the response. 2 days later, a package arrived. It wasn't large, just a small brown box with an international label and a wax seal on the edge. Malik stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a letter. Written in Italian, but translated on official letterhead beneath it. Dear Malik. In your silence, you spoke louder than the most passionate sermons. In your belief, you reminded us what the Church exists for. And in your mercy, you have given me hope. Please accept this gift, not as a reward, but as a sign that your faith, though ridiculed, is never forgotten. With love. Franciscus. Beneath the letter was a rosary. A simple wooden one, clearly handmade. But it wasn't the object that made Malik's throat close up. It was what it meant. The Pope, had seen him. Had believed him. Had believed in him. That Sunday, Malik wore a suit to church. Not just because of the cameras waiting outside. Not because of the press people asking for interviews. But because it felt like a sacred moment. Like he was walking into his grandmother's kitchen all over again, holding something holy in his hands. St. Ignatius Parish was packed. People from the neighborhood. From other cities. From online. Even Jalen Marcus and his mother sat in the front row. When the priest asked if Malik would like to say something, he hesitated for only a second. Then stood up. Walked slowly to the front. Took a deep breath. And spoke. I used to think being laughed at meant I was wrong. Now I know, sometimes being laughed at means you're early. He looked out at the faces. Faith isn't easy when everything around you is built to break it. When the streets don't forgive. When schools don't protect. When cops see threat before they see person. He took the rosary from his pocket, held it up. But this? This isn't about being Catholic. Or Christian. Or anything else. This is about believing in something enough to live it out loud, even when the world wants you quiet. He paused. And I'm not quiet anymore. Afterward, reporters swarmed him. Miss Laverne held them off with the sharpness only grandmothers from the South can deliver. Give the boy 5 minutes to breathe, for heaven's sake. But Malik didn't mind. He felt light. Not like the pain had vanished. Not like injustice had disappeared. But like he had finally stepped out of the shadows. And maybe, just maybe, others were starting to follow. It started with a segment on local news. Just 5 minutes at the end of the 6 o'clock report, South Side teens' faith inspires millions. Then it hit national. MSNBC. CNN. Even Good Morning America requested an interview. Malik Johnson, the kid who wrote The Pope, had become a symbol. A face of modern faith. A soft-spoken protester. A 17-year-old with a notebook and a nerve the world didn't expect. And it terrified him. At first, it felt like a blessing. People smiled when they saw him on the street. A mailman handed him a letter from Colorado with, "To the kid who made the Pope cry," written across the front. Kids at school who used to ignore him now asked to sit beside him at lunch. Even teachers said his name like it had weight now. But the internet doesn't just praise. It pokes. The comments started trickling in. Bet this kid is being coached by some activist group. Looks staged. A Vatican PR stunt. Just another soft boy who'll grow up to hate the country that gave him freedom. And worse. Words Malik had never seen written down before. Words meant to tear, to spit, to humiliate. Miss Laverne tried to shield him. She turned off the TV when the anchor said something careless. She hid letters that looked suspicious. She prayed louder at night. But Malik could feel it, like smoke in the walls. The attention wasn't just shining on him anymore. It was burning. He stopped checking his messages. He kept his phone on silent. He didn't post. Didn't respond. Didn't write. For days, he moved through the halls like a ghost in his own life. Even Brianna noticed. "You good?" she asked one afternoon, leaning against his locker. Malik shrugged. "Just tired." "From what?" "Being a legend." He didn't laugh. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered. "I know," she said, gentler now. "But you started it. You gave people something real. That's gonna scare the fake ones." That night, Malik sat in the dark. No music. No books. Just him, the rosary, and the creeping doubt in his chest. What if they were right? What if I'm just a kid playing prophet? What if none of this matters? He stared at the letter from Pope Francis, now framed on his desk. The words blurred. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was loud. He grabbed his notebook and started writing, not a letter this time, but a confession. "I don't know if I can do this. I'm not strong enough to carry people's hopes. I just wanted someone to hear me. I didn't mean for everyone to look. I'm scared." And that's where the pen stopped. He woke the next morning to a knock on his bedroom door. It was Miss Laverne. She carried a shoebox. "What's that?" he asked. She smiled, sat beside him, and placed it in his lap. "Your mama's letters." Malik's breath caught. "I kept them," she said. "Didn't know if you were ready before." He opened the box slowly. Inside were old envelopes, some tattered, some smudged. One had a lipstick kiss on the corner. The first one read, "To my little believer." His fingers shook as he opened it. Malik. I don't know what the world will look like when you read this. I don't know who you'll be yet. But I pray you still believe in softness. I pray you haven't had that stolen. There's going to be a day when people doubt you. A day when they laugh. A day when they try to turn your voice into something dirty. Don't let them. You were born with more spirit than most folks know what to do with. That's scary for them. But it's beautiful for you. Sing. Write. Speak. Kneel. Whatever keeps your heart awake, do that. And when you feel alone, remember this: God's loudest work happens in the quietest kids. I love you, even when I'm far. Mom. Malik read it twice. Then again. And when the tears came, he didn't hold them back. That day, Malik returned to school with his shoulders a little straighter. He walked through the halls not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as himself. He didn't need the world to clap. He just needed to keep walking. And at lunch, for the first time in days, he pulled out his notebook. He opened to a fresh page. Dear Pope Francis. It got loud for a while. Too loud. People started seeing me instead of hearing what I was trying to say. But I think I understand something now. When the world turns to listen, you don't speak louder. You speak truer. That afternoon, the principal called Malik into the office again. But this time, it wasn't to warn him. It was to ask for help. We're bringing in community officers next month. But the students don't trust them. The principal rubbed his forehead. They trust you. Malik blinked. You want me to, what? Be their translator? I want you to help us build something. A bridge. You've shown people how to listen. Now maybe you can help teach us how to hear. Malik walked home that day feeling something shift inside him. Not pride. Not peace. But purpose. And for the first time in weeks, he felt like the storm had passed. Not because it was gone. But because he had learned how to stand in the rain. The community center gym hadn't been used for much lately, at least not for anything hopeful. Once a week, it hosted self-defense classes. Twice a month, a food pantry pop-up. But that Thursday evening, the bleachers were filled with folding chairs, the walls lined with officers in uniform, and Malik seated front and center with a microphone in his hand. He didn't ask for this. But he showed up. Because showing up, that's where healing starts. Alright, we're live in 5, said Marcus Deeds, a local community organizer who now ran the youth liaison committee. Malik, you good? Malik nodded. His palms were sweating. He hadn't spoken in front of adults like this, especially not adults in uniform. They stood across the room like statues, serious, unreadable, most of them white, all of them wary. Across from them sat kids who had already made up their minds about what this meeting was, a waste of time. But this was Malik's idea. And now it was time to make it matter. He stepped up to the mic. Thanks, everyone, for being here, he began, voice even. Especially those who didn't want to be. A few nervous chuckles. Some eye rolls. But people were listening. I grew up scared of cops. Not because I was doing anything wrong. But because when I was 8, I saw my cousin thrown to the ground just for walking home with a hoodie on. He looked across the room. Most of us in here. We've got stories like that. And those stories don't go away when we turn 18. They don't go away when we graduate. They just get heavier. A pause. But we're here tonight because maybe, we don't want to carry them alone anymore. The format was simple, a circle conversation. Everyone equal. No podiums. No ranks. Just stories. Malik introduced the format, then stepped back to let it unfold. The first few minutes were stiff. Officers fumbled through awkward introductions. Kids crossed their arms. No one wanted to go first. Until Jalen spoke. "I still got a scar," he said, lifting his sleeve. "From when your partner tackled me. I play trumpet, man. I don't even run fast." Silence. One officer, an older Latino man named Sergeant Luis Ortega, leaned forward. "I wasn't there," he said quietly, "but I'm sorry. You deserved better. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fix. But it was something." And the wall cracked. More voices followed. Trina talked about being followed around in the corner store by a cop like she was casing the place. An officer shared how he had to pull his own son over once, scared someone else might do it first. Malik stayed mostly quiet. He listened. He took notes. He watched as two worlds, long divided, sat under the same flickering gym lights and started to see, not solve, but see each other. That was the beginning. Later that night, as they packed up, Ortega approached Malik. "You got more power than most people twice your age," he said. "Use it wisely." "I'm trying," Malik said. "You want to ride along sometime?" Ortega asked. Malik hesitated. "Like, in a patrol car?" "Yeah. No press. No setup. Just see what it's like from the other side." It was the kind of offer that made people uncomfortable. But Malik didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said. "I'll do it." The next Saturday, at 8 a.m. sharp, Malik climbed into the front seat of a squad car. He expected cold silence. He got stale coffee, the sound of dispatch, and Ortega humming along to old R&B as they rolled down 63rd Street. For hours, they cruised the neighborhood. Ortega talked. Malik asked questions. They stopped to check on a closed-down playground, then a noise complaint at a barber shop. Nothing violent. Nothing dramatic. Just, real life. But even in that calm, Malik could feel it. Every time they slowed near a group of black teens, the tension thickened. People looked up. Looked away. One kid yelled, "What, y'all gonna shoot us for breathing now?" Ortega sighed. "This is what I mean," he said. "Even when we're not here to hurt, they think we are." Malik didn't respond right away. "Yeah," he said eventually. "But for a long time, y'all were." That night, Malik sat on his porch, staring at the sky. He thought about bridges. Not the physical kind, but the ones made of trust and time and uncomfortable conversations. He thought about how easy it would be to walk away. To say, "Not my job." To let someone else carry it. But he couldn't. He had been given a voice. Now he had to decide what kind of sound it would make. "Dear Pope Francis. Tonight I rode in a squad car. And it felt strange, like sitting in a language I didn't speak. But I listened. And I think they listened too. Bridges don't get built overnight. But I believe one's starting here. Right in the middle of the broken pieces. It hurts. It's slow. But it's holy. Thanks for believing I could be part of it." The next morning, the community center called. "We want to make this regular," Marcus said. "Monthly roundtables. Dialogue between officers and teens. But we need someone to lead it." Malik blinked. "You mean, me?" "You started the conversation," Marcus said. "Now help us keep it going." Malik looked down at the notebook in his lap, the letter from the Pope on his wall, the rosary on his wrist. And then he smiled. "All right," he said. "Let's build a bridge." It started with a flyer. Bright red, bold white letters. "Stop talking. Start resisting. No more meetings with the enemy." At the bottom, someone had scrawled in Sharpie. "Malik Johnson is not our leader." He found it taped to his locker Monday morning. Another was stapled to the youth center door. A third? Handed out in the school parking lot. Malik stared at the flyer like it was in a foreign language. But the message was clear. Not everyone believed in bridges. Some people wanted fire. By lunchtime, whispers filled the halls. They say he's working with the cops now. I heard he got paid. Man, he's a sellout. Malik tried to ignore it, but the words followed him. Even Brianna looked unsure. Not angry, just distant. You good? He asked her. She hesitated. You sure you're still on our side? That stung. More than it should have. I haven't switched sides, he said quietly. I'm just trying to stop the bleeding. That afternoon, Malik found a burned piece of paper in his mailbox. Someone had taken a copy of his letter to the Pope and lit it on fire, just enough to leave a blackened corner, enough to send a message. Your words won't save us. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his room, the rosary loose in his fingers, replaying every choice he'd made. Was he naive? Did he think kindness could outshout pain? Maybe I overstepped, he thought. Maybe they're right. He almost didn't write that night. But then he did. Dear Pope Francis. Tonight I feel like I've failed. Not because I said the wrong thing, but because I tried to say everything at once. To the people hurting, I sound like I'm forgiving too fast. To the people in power, I sound like I'm too angry. To the media, I'm just content. To myself? I'm not sure anymore. Do all peacemakers get called traitors before they're called brave? The next community circle was almost empty. Only 4 officers showed up. Only a dozen teens. Even Marcus seemed nervous. I don't know if this has legs anymore, he admitted. They want rage. Not reason. Malik stood by the snack table, watching everyone avoid eye contact. And then the door creaked open. Jalen walked in. He didn't speak. Just sat down. Crossed his arms. Then Trina. Then Brianna. And then slowly, the seats filled. Not packed. But enough. Enough to keep going. Malik took the mic. This isn't easy, he started. I don't expect it to be. But when something hurts, we don't burn it down just to prove we're in pain. He looked around. I'm not trying to fix the system with a circle and a box of cookies. I know that. A chuckle. But I am trying to stop another kid from getting slammed against a wall for asking a question. I'm trying to stop the silence that comes after the sirens leave. He paused. You don't have to trust me. But if you believe even a little that things could be different, then let's try again. This time, it worked. Not because it was perfect. Not because anyone cried or hugged. But because people stayed. They listened. And when they left, they said they'd come back. The next day, a fire broke out behind the gym at school. No one was hurt. But it rattled everyone. Rumors flew. Someone said it was intentional. That it was connected to the meetings. That it was a warning. The fire marshal couldn't confirm anything. But Malik knew. Some people didn't want change. They wanted chaos. The school put the meetings on hold. Malik was called into the principal's office again. I don't want you getting hurt, the principal said. Neither do I, Malik replied. But I'm not quitting. That night, he didn't write a letter. He wrote a poem. One he'd later read aloud on a live stream that would be shared 400,000 times. They call me soft because I choose mercy. But softness doesn't mean weak. It means refusing to use the same fists that bruised me. It means speaking when my voice shakes. It means building a bridge where everyone else wants a wall. Soft? Sure. But if softness survived fire, ridicule, silence, and still stood, Then maybe it was steal all along. People started using the hashtag. Hashtag SteelSoft. It trended for 3 days. And suddenly, Malik wasn't alone again. The phone buzzed incessantly that Friday evening. Malik stared at the screen, unread messages, tags, and comments piled up faster than he could read them. The hashtags, hashtag SteelSoft and hashtag BridgeNotWall, had exploded across social media, each post, each tweet carrying a new round of praise, criticism, and debate. The live stream he'd done last night. It had gone viral. People across the country had heard him speak, his raw words, his shaky but firm voice, his refusal to back down. But as the likes and shares piled up, so did the calls, press inquiries, reporters, even talk show hosts begging for an interview. And then there was the other side of the coin, the people who didn't get it. "Malik, you've really gone off the deep end this time," his friend Eli texted. "You really think they're going to listen to you? Just drop it, man." He didn't respond to that. Eli had been one of the first to defend him, but as time passed, Eli's support was becoming more like a distant memory, lost in the background noise of this new war Malik was unwittingly fighting. He glanced at the letter from the Pope pinned to his wall. The signature in the corner had been smudged slightly from when he had wiped a tear away. This was it. This was what he had been fighting for. A future that wasn't defined by fear, by violence, by distrust. But the storm he was stepping into was much bigger than anything he had anticipated. And it was only just beginning. Saturday morning arrived like a slap in the face. Malik sat down with his mother at the breakfast table. She was the only one who still looked at him like she understood. He could see the concern behind her eyes, the worry she tried so hard to hide. "Malik, I need you to be careful," his mother said, her voice quiet but serious. "I know you're doing what you think is right, but you're stirring up a lot of things, son. You're in the middle of something bigger than you realize." "I know, Mom. But someone has to speak up," Malik replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "I can't just sit back and watch it happen anymore." His mother's gaze softened. She placed her hand over his. "You've always been brave, but bravery doesn't mean throwing yourself into a fire without thinking about the burn." Malik shook his head. "This isn't just about me. This is about everyone who's been hurt and ignored." As the day went on, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The intensity of the attention was suffocating. Everywhere he went, there were eyes on him. Everyone had an opinion, and half of them seemed to be painted with disdain. His classmates at school, the people in the neighborhood, the officers, they were all divided. But it wasn't just the public perception that was weighing on him. He felt it deep in his chest, an ache that wouldn't go away. A feeling like he was standing at the edge of something too big to control, like a storm was closing in, and he was at the center of it. That evening, the phone rang again. This time, it was a call he hadn't expected. "Malik?" "It's Marcus," the voice on the other end said. "We need to talk. Meet me at the center." The community center gym was dark when Malik arrived. The usual lights were off, but there was a soft hum coming from a few spotlights. When he walked in, Marcus was standing with Sergeant Ortega, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We need you to understand something, Malik," Marcus said. His voice was tense, his usual easygoing demeanor gone. "This thing you've started? It's getting bigger than anyone anticipated. And not everyone is playing nice." Malik swallowed hard, his nerves kicking in. "What are you saying?" Ortega stepped forward, rubbing his eyes. "There are threats. The people who want to see you shut down, they've made their move." Marcus nodded. "We're talking about organized groups. Some local, some not so local. And they're all angry." Malik felt a lump form in his throat. "What do you mean? Angry about what?" "I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to." "I know," Marcus interrupted. "But they don't care about that. They care about control. And they won't hesitate to hurt you or anyone close to you. Malik's heart pounded. He thought about his family, his friends, everyone he loved. So what? You want me to stop? To walk away? Ortega's face was grim. I don't want you to stop. But you need to understand the consequences. And you need to be ready. Malik didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. His mind raced in a dozen different directions, none of them leading anywhere but confusion. The storm was coming. The next day, Malik met with Brianna at the park. She had been quiet lately, too quiet. She had always been his biggest supporter, the one who believed in him when no one else did. But lately, even she seemed to be distancing herself. Brianna, he said softly, are you okay? She sat down on the park bench, looking out across the street. I don't know anymore, Malik, she said, her voice trembling. You're doing something important. But what if it's not worth it? What if it's too dangerous? Malik felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just his life on the line anymore. It was everyone's. I don't know what else to do, he said quietly. I can't just sit by and watch everything fall apart. I have to keep fighting. Brianna turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. I just want you to be safe. You've already done so much. But you're putting yourself in the line of fire. And I'm scared you won't come back. Malik's heart clenched at the pain in her voice. He reached out and took her hand. I'll come back. I swear I will. But I need you with me. I need you to believe in this, believe in us, because if I'm doing this alone, it's going to destroy me. For a moment, she didn't speak. But then, slowly, she nodded. I'm with you, Malik. I just need you to be careful. Later that evening, Malik stood in his room, staring at the rosary on his desk. He had to make a decision. He had to choose between the safety of retreat and the strength of perseverance. It was then that his phone buzzed again. It was another message from Eli. Malik, I heard they're planning something. A protest. I don't want you caught up in it. Please. Don't make this worse. Malik stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. What do I do? The city felt different now. The air was thick with something that Malik couldn't quite put his finger on. It wasn't just the tension that had been building for weeks, nor the murmurs of dissent and fear that swirled around him. It was something deeper, something that lingered in the spaces between words, in the silence of the moments when people looked away. He couldn't escape the feeling that he was walking on a razor's edge. Malik stood by the window, staring at the street below. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made everything feel like it was holding its breath. He hadn't slept much since the conversation with Brianna. He kept thinking about her face, her tears, her quiet voice begging him to stop. To turn back. He understood her fear. But could he really give up now? His phone buzzed again. Another text from Eli. You sure about this, Malik? There's no going back once you do it. Malik's fingers hovered over the screen. He wanted to respond, wanted to tell Eli that this was bigger than any of them. That this wasn't about him anymore. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he put the phone down and grabbed his jacket. He needed to see for himself. The protest was planned for that afternoon, right in the heart of the city's downtown. Malik had heard the rumors for days now. They said it was going to be peaceful, a chance to raise awareness without violence. But deep down, Malik knew better. When the people were this angry, when they felt like their voices had been ignored for so long, peace was a fragile thing. He stepped into his car, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Should he stop it before it started? Should he back out, listen to Eli, to his mother, to Brianna? Or should he let it happen and see where it led? It wasn't until he was halfway to the location that the real weight of the situation hit him. This was it. The breaking point. The moment where things would either shift for good or spiral out of control. When he arrived, the crowd was already gathering. A mix of faces, some determined, others fearful, a few barely holding back tears. It was everything he'd hoped for and everything he feared. The people were here, all right, but the tension in the air was palpable. The chants had started, quiet at first, but growing louder by the second. There was a sense of urgency in the way they marched, their eyes fixed forward as if they had nothing left to lose. He walked through the crowd, barely noticing the familiar faces around him. Some people waved at him, others gave him nods of encouragement. But there were also stares, hard looks, accusing, full of disbelief. "You Malik Johnson," someone called from behind him. He turned to see a young man he didn't recognize. His eyes were wide with excitement, but there was something in the way he looked at Malik that sent a chill down his spine. "Yeah, that's me," Malik said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing in his head. The young man grinned. "You're the reason we're all here. You're the one who got everyone talking." Malik didn't know what to say. The words felt heavy, like a mantle he didn't deserve to wear. "Just, don't let this go too far," the young man added, almost as if he was warning him. "People like you don't get second chances." Malik nodded, his throat tightening. He had no idea what this would turn into, but it was too late to turn back now. It didn't take long for things to escalate. The police had arrived by mid-afternoon, lining the streets, blocking off major intersections, their riot gear glinting in the afternoon light. The protesters grew more agitated as the cops moved in closer, their movements sharp, their presence almost suffocating. "Stay calm, stay calm." Malik called out to the crowd, pushing his way through the throng of bodies. "We're here to raise our voices, not to start a fight." But the shouts only grew louder. Someone in the crowd threw a bottle. Another person began chanting slogans, urging others to act. The tension broke like a string pulled too tight. The first blow came from an officer, a sharp shove that sent someone tumbling to the ground. Then the pushing started. The shouting. The air was thick with anger, fear, and confusion. Malik felt his heart race. This wasn't what he had wanted. This wasn't what he had envisioned when he started speaking out. He had hoped for change, for peaceful dialogue. But in this moment, the violence seemed inevitable. He pushed through the chaos, trying to get to the front. "Stop! Please," he shouted, his voice barely carrying over the noise. But no one was listening. The protesters were fighting back, pushing against the police barricades, shouting in frustration. And then it happened. The first flash of anger exploded in front of him. Two protesters were dragged to the ground by officers, their screams cutting through the air. Malik's breath caught in his throat. "Enough," he screamed, his voice hoarse. "Stop." But it was too late. The protest had turned into something else entirely. It was no longer about raising awareness. It was about survival, about proving a point, about something that Malik couldn't fully understand. He turned and ran toward the front of the line, trying to stop it before it spiraled any further. By the time the sirens began to wail in the distance, Malik was out of breath, his chest tight with anxiety. The protest was dissolving into chaos, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Later that night, Malik sat on the floor of his room, his head buried in his hands. The chaos of the protest replayed in his mind over and over. What had he done? What had he started? His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Brianna. "I don't know what to say anymore. You've made a choice. But what happens next?" Malik couldn't answer. He couldn't tell her that everything would be okay because he didn't know anymore. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Malik sat at the kitchen table, staring at the scattered papers and half-drunk coffee mug in front of him. The world felt different now. The chaos of the protest still echoed in his ears, the images of violence and shouting replaying in his mind. He had been part of something larger than himself, something that felt out of control, something that had slipped beyond his grasp. But as much as he wanted to escape the weight of it all, there was no running away. The protests had made the news. His face was plastered across every screen. The interviews, the debates, it was like a storm had erupted and was sweeping everything in its path, including him. The phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Brianna. "Malik, I don't know how much more of this I can take. People are saying things about you. About us. It's all over social media. This isn't just about the cause anymore. It's about you, and the people you care about." Malik clenched his jaw, trying to push down the fear gnawing at his insides. Brianna's message wasn't the first one like it. There had been others, texts, emails, phone calls from family, friends, even people he barely knew, all of them asking the same questions. Did he really understand what he had gotten himself into? The door creaked open, and Malik's mother stepped into the kitchen, her face tight with worry. She had been trying to hide it, but it was hard not to see the toll it was taking on her. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes tired. "Malik," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." He looked up at her, meeting her gaze. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even disappointed. She was just scared. "You're doing something important, I know that," she said, sitting down across from him. "But you're in over your head. This isn't what we imagined for you. You've always been the one who thought things through, who didn't rush into things." Malik let out a long breath. "I thought I was thinking things through, Mom. I thought I was doing the right thing." She shook her head. "You're not the only one who's been affected by this, Malik. Your father, your uncles. They're all worried. They're talking about moving out of the city. About how this whole thing could get dangerous. They're scared you'll be hurt, or worse." Malik felt a pang in his chest. He didn't want to think about the consequences of his actions. But there they were, looming in front of him, real and undeniable. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to make a difference. To stand up for what was right." "I know, baby," his mother said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "I know. But you have to understand, sometimes standing up for what's right means knowing when to walk away." Malik didn't know how to answer. He wanted to argue, to tell her that he couldn't stop now, that the movement was bigger than him, bigger than their family. But the words wouldn't come. He didn't know how to explain it. He didn't know how to explain the fire that had sparked in him, the need to be heard, to make his voice count in a world that seemed determined to silence him. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence between them. Malik stood up, still lost in thought, and opened the door. It was Marcus. His face was grim, his usual easygoing nature replaced with a serious, almost frantic energy. "Malik, we need to talk," Marcus said. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room quickly before landing on Malik. "You're in serious trouble." Malik raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "The backlash from the protest, it's not just online anymore. It's real. People are getting violent. I got word that some of the groups you've pissed off are escalating. They've started making threats. And they're not just talking." Malik's stomach churned. "What kind of threats?" "People you care about. Your family. Your friends." Marcus's voice dropped, his eyes dark with concern. "They know where you live, Malik. They know your people. And they're going after them." Malik's heart raced. He had known that things had gotten out of hand, but this? This was worse than he could have imagined. The stakes had been raised, and he was now in a position where every decision mattered more than ever. "What do I do?" Malik asked, his voice barely a whisper. The weight of the situation was suffocating. "You need to get out of here," Marcus said, his voice hard. "For your own safety. For your family's safety. You have to lay low. Until we figure this out." Malik shook his head, panic rising in his chest. "I can't just run away. I can't leave everything behind." "You're not running, Malik. You're surviving," Marcus replied sharply. "You're doing what you need to do to keep yourself and the people you love safe. You have a bigger mission, but if you're dead, it's over." Malik felt like the room was closing in on him. His mother's worried face, Marcus's urgent tone, it all mixed together into a blur of fear and confusion. He stepped away from them, pacing the room, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do now? If he left, if he ran away, would that mean he was giving up on everything he had fought for? Was he abandoning the cause? Or was it just a temporary retreat to live and fight another day? What about Brianna? Malik asked, his voice strained. What if they go after her? What if they come for her next? Marcus was quiet for a moment before he spoke. Brianna's tough, Malik. But she can't protect herself from everything. She needs to know what's going on. You need to warn her. Everyone around you does. I can't just disappear, Malik said, his voice trembling with the weight of it all. This was supposed to matter. It was supposed to mean something. I know it was, Marcus said softly, his eyes filled with sympathy. But right now, it's not about what it means. It's about what it could cost you. Malik looked at his mother, whose eyes were full of unshed tears. She was scared. For him. For their family. For what this fight was turning him into. I'm not giving up, Malik said firmly. But even as he said the words, he didn't know if he believed them anymore. He didn't know if he had the strength to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward when everything around him seemed to be falling apart. The days after Marcus's warning passed in a blur of anxiety and chaos. Malik's phone buzzed constantly, calls, texts, alerts, news stories. The protests had grown larger, fiercer. What had started as a peaceful march had turned into something more complicated, more dangerous. And Malik was at the center of it all. His mother insisted that he lay low, urged him to go somewhere, anywhere, just to get out of the city, out of the line of fire. The more he thought about it, the more the idea seemed like the only reasonable option. But in his gut, Malik knew he couldn't leave. Not now. Not after everything. It was late one evening when Malik finally decided to meet with Brianna. He had been avoiding her calls, not knowing how to explain what was happening. But now, he couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable conversation. He had to face her, and whatever it was she had to say. The cafe they met at was quiet, tucked away on a corner of a street Malik used to walk down every day. It felt like another life now, simpler, safer, before all of this had begun. Brianna was already sitting at a small table by the window when Malik walked in. She looked up, her eyes tired, but the moment they locked, Malik felt a pang of guilt in his chest. She had been through so much already, and here he was, dragging her deeper into this mess. Hey, he said softly, pulling out the chair across from her. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his own anxiety. Brianna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Hey, Malik. There was a long pause. Neither of them knew how to start. They just sat there, the weight of everything between them, before Malik finally spoke. I'm sorry for all of this, he said, his voice hoarse. I never meant for it to go this far. I never wanted you to get caught up in this. Brianna sighed and leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. Malik, you've been apologizing for days. You're doing it again. I get it. I really do. But the question is, what are you going to do now? Malik's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean, are you going to keep going with this? Are you going to continue fighting for the cause even if it means putting everything on the line? Your family, your safety, my safety. Brianna's voice was steady, but Malik could hear the edge in it, the same worry he had been trying to ignore for weeks. He didn't know how to answer her. The fight was bigger than him, bigger than any of them. But Brianna was right. The more he pushed forward, the more people he loved were being hurt. His mother, his friends, Brianna, how could he keep dragging them through this? Brianna, Malik said, his voice quieter now. I don't know what to do. I feel like if I walk away now, I'm abandoning everything. But if I stay, if I keep going, I'm putting everyone I care about at risk. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Malik, you can't save the world if you don't save yourself first. And if you really care about the people around you, you have to think about them too. I'm not saying you should give up on your cause. I'm saying you need to protect yourself, protect us. Malik's heart weighed heavy in his chest. He had never been the type to run from a fight. But this was different. He had never considered the consequences of pushing so hard, so fast. And now, with everything spiraling out of control, he was left to wonder if there was still a way to fight without losing everything. The next day, Malik sat in his room, staring at his phone. He had been trying to figure out his next move, but the options seemed bleak. He couldn't go back. But could he keep pushing forward? He needed answers, someone to help him make sense of the mess he was in. That's when he thought of Eli. His best friend, his ally in all of this, had always been the one to challenge him to think bigger, to push boundaries. But this time, Malik wasn't sure if Eli would see things the same way. He dialed Eli's number, the sound of the ringing in his ear loud and jarring. Finally, Eli picked up. Malik? What's going on, man? Eli's voice was bright, but there was an undertone of concern. I don't know, Eli. I really don't know anymore, Malik said, his voice trembling. Everything's falling apart. I'm scared. I'm losing control. And I don't know what to do. There was a brief silence on the other end. I'm listening, Eli said after a moment. I've been thinking about what Brianna said, Malik continued, pacing the room as he spoke. Maybe I need to step back, take a break, let things cool down. But at the same time, I feel like if I do that, I'm just letting the whole thing die. Eli's voice softened. Malik, look. I get it. This has been your thing. You've been leading this, and it feels like if you stop, you're giving up. But you need to ask yourself, what are you really fighting for? And what are you willing to sacrifice to keep fighting? If you keep going like this, something's gonna break. And I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about everyone around you. Malik stopped pacing and sat down on the edge of his bed. He had been so focused on the fight that he hadn't really stopped to think about what it was costing him. What it was costing everyone he loved. I don't know if I can walk away, Eli, he said quietly. But I don't know how much more I can take either. Eli was quiet for a long moment. You don't have to walk away, Malik. But you can't keep doing this alone. Find the people who can help, and take care of yourself. The cause isn't going anywhere. But if you don't take care of you, none of it will matter. Malik hung up the phone, his thoughts racing. What Eli had said made sense, but it also left him feeling more conflicted than ever. He looked out the window, the city skyline stretched before him like a giant puzzle. What piece of it was he supposed to be? Was he meant to fight until the end, or was it time to step back and regroup? And if he did step back, what would that mean for the people who had already started to follow him? The weight of it all pressed down on him, and for the first time in a long time, Malik felt completely lost. The days following Malik's conversation with Eli were a blur of sleepless nights and restless thoughts. The city felt like it was closing in on him, a constant hum of uncertainty buzzing in his ears. Every street he walked down, every conversation he overheard, every glance thrown his way, it all felt like a reminder that nothing was the same anymore. Malik knew he couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The more he tried to push the reality of the situation aside, the more it pushed back, harder and harder. It wasn't just his safety at risk anymore, it was his family, his friends, Brianna, the people he cared about the most. His mother had stopped asking him about the protests. She had stopped asking him to come home early or to take a break. Now, there was a kind of quiet resignation in her eyes when she looked at him, as if she had already given up on trying to change his mind. But Malik wasn't sure he could change his mind. Could he really walk away? Could he just let go of everything he had believed in? It was late one evening when Malik's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Brianna. "Malik, we need to talk. I've been thinking. And I think we both need to make a choice. Whatever happens next, we need to know what we're fighting for. We need to know if we're in this together." Malik's heart skipped a beat. Brianna's words echoed in his mind, weighing heavier than he expected. They were at a crossroads. The path ahead wasn't clear. But he knew that whatever happened, it wouldn't be the same. The next morning, Malik met Brianna at their usual spot, an old park bench near the edge of the city. It was quiet there, surrounded by the sounds of leaves rustling and birds singing. A stark contrast to the chaos and noise that had become their lives. Brianna was already sitting when Malik arrived, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked up at him, her face serious, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that made Malik's chest tighten. "Malik," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking about everything. And I think I finally understand. I've been so angry and scared, but I haven't been seeing the bigger picture." Malik sat down beside her, feeling the weight of her words. "What do you mean?" I get that this is bigger than us. I understand why you're doing this. But I also get that we can't keep pushing forward without considering the cost." Brianna's voice trembled slightly, but she continued. "The people we love are being hurt. Your family, my family, us. I don't know how much more we can take before everything falls apart." Malik stared ahead, his eyes distant. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it from Brianna, hearing her say it aloud, made it all feel too real. He wanted to fight, wanted to push through the pain, but he didn't know how much longer he could hold on. "Brianna," Malik said softly, his voice hoarse. "I don't know if I can stop. I don't know how to walk away from this. It's like everything I've been working for is slipping through my fingers. I feel like if I give up, everything will have been for nothing." Brianna turned to face him, her hand brushing his. "Malik, you're not giving up. But you need to think about what's worth sacrificing. You've already given so much. But if you lose yourself in this fight, what's left?" There was silence between them for a moment, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Malik's heart ached. He knew she was right. He had been so focused on the cause, on the fight, that he hadn't stopped to think about what it was doing to him, what it was doing to the people he cared about. I don't know what the right choice is," Malik admitted, his voice shaking slightly. "I thought I had everything figured out. But now, I feel more lost than ever." Brianna squeezed his hand gently. "You don't have to figure everything out right now. But you need to make a choice. We need to know if we're still in this together, if we're going to keep fighting or if we're going to find a different way." Malik looked at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. It mirrored his own. They had been through so much together, and the thought of walking away now, of abandoning the fight, felt impossible. But Brianna was right. They had reached a point where they couldn't go on blindly. He had to make a choice. And that choice would define everything. Later that night, Malik found himself sitting alone in his room, his mind spinning with possibilities. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from Marcus. "Malik, we need to meet. This is bigger than we thought. People are getting hurt. It's time to decide what we're doing." Malik's stomach churned. He knew Marcus was right. It had been building up for weeks, the violence, the threats. It was all coming to a head. The decision couldn't wait any longer. He stood up, his hands trembling as he grabbed his jacket. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face whatever was coming, but he knew he had no choice. He had to face it. He had to decide. At the meeting spot, a quiet alley behind an old warehouse, Malik found Marcus waiting for him. His face was grim, his posture tense. "You've been hard to reach, Malik," Marcus said, his voice low. "We need to talk about what comes next." Malik nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I've been thinking about it. I don't know what the right answer is anymore." Marcus studied him for a long moment before speaking. "There's no perfect answer, man. But we can't keep pushing like this. People are getting hurt. And we're not making the impact we thought we would. We're just creating more chaos." Malik clenched his fists at his sides. He had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud felt different. His heart raced. "What are you saying? That we just give up? Walk away?" "No, Malik," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "I'm saying we need to rethink this. We need to find a way to keep fighting, but without losing everything. Without losing ourselves." Malik felt his chest tighten. He had been running on adrenaline for so long that he hadn't stopped to think about what he was really fighting for. What was it all for, if it meant losing everything in the process? As he walked away from the meeting with Marcus, Malik felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had a choice to make. And whatever he chose, it would change everything. The days after his conversation with Marcus were the hardest Malik had ever faced. Every moment seemed to stretch on endlessly as he weighed his options, the pressure mounting with each passing hour. He couldn't help but replay Brianna's words in his mind, "What's worth sacrificing?" It was a question that lingered in his thoughts like a heavy fog. What was he willing to give up? Was the cause worth losing everything for? He sat in his room late one night, the silence around him thick and suffocating. His phone sat on the desk, buzzing every so often with updates from friends, messages from the protesters, and news reports. But none of it felt real anymore. The weight of it all, the momentum he had built up, suddenly seemed trivial compared to what was at stake now, his future, his relationships, and the people he loved. Malik looked out the window at the city skyline, the lights flickering like stars, each one a symbol of hope, of possibility. But those stars now seemed distant, almost unreachable, as though the city was slipping away from him. He had built his life around this fight, this cause. He had believed so deeply in it. But now, for the first time, he wasn't sure if he still believed in the path he had chosen. The following morning, Malik decided to take a walk. He needed space to think. He couldn't sit around any longer, hoping for clarity to magically arrive. He had to act. But how? He wandered through the streets of the city, each corner reminding him of how much had changed. A place that had once felt safe and familiar now seemed foreign. He passed the old park, where he had first met Brianna. He paused for a moment, recalling the carefree conversations they had shared there, back when everything seemed so simple. It was then that Malik received another message. This time, it was from his mother. "Malik, please come home. We need to talk." His stomach twisted. His mother had always been his rock, the one person who had never wavered in her support, no matter what. But lately, he had seen the worry in her eyes. He could hear it in her voice when she asked him to stay safe. She was afraid, and Malik knew it was because she saw the dangers of this fight more clearly than he did. His fingers hovered over the screen, contemplating the decision. Should he go home and face his mother's concerns head-on? Or should he continue down the path he had set for himself, knowing that the longer he ignored her, the more the rift between them would grow? Malik made his way back to his apartment, his mind racing. When he arrived, his mother was already waiting in the living room. She looked at him, her face a mixture of relief and worry. "Malik," she began softly, standing up as he walked in, "I'm so glad you're home. She took a deep breath. But I need to know that you're okay. That you're safe. Malik dropped his bag by the door and sat down across from her, feeling a lump form in his throat. This was the moment he had been avoiding, the conversation that he knew had to happen. I'm fine, Mom, he said, trying to sound reassuring, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I'm doing what needs to be done. But I know you're worried. His mother nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Malik, I see what's happening in this city. I see the chaos. I see the danger. I'm scared, baby. You've always been my son, my only child. I can't lose you to this fight. No cause is worth your life. Her words hit Malik like a punch to the gut. He had been so consumed with his mission that he hadn't really considered the pain it was causing his mother. He knew she was right, nothing in this world was worth losing her, or anyone else he loved. I don't want to leave, Mom, he whispered. I feel like if I stop now, it'll all be for nothing. But at the same time, I can't keep going like this. I can't keep putting everyone at risk. His mother reached out and took his hand, her grip firm but loving. I know you're doing this because you believe in it. But you also need to believe in yourself. You're not the same person you were when this all started. You've grown, Malik. You've learned so much. But you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders alone. Malik's heart clenched at her words. He had always felt like he needed to prove himself, to show everyone that he was capable of making a difference. But in that moment, he realized something important: he didn't have to do it all by himself. The next day, Malik called Brianna. He needed to talk to her, to figure out where they stood. He couldn't do this alone, and he knew he had to make a decision. A hard one. When they met at their usual spot, Brianna was already waiting. She looked at him expectantly, as if she had been waiting for him to make this choice. You okay? She asked softly, her gaze searching his face. I think so, Malik replied, his voice uncertain. Brianna. I've been thinking about what you said. About what Marcus said. I can't keep going like this. I can't keep putting everyone at risk. I have to find a way to fight, but without losing myself in the process. Without losing the people I love. Brianna smiled, a sad but understanding smile. Malik, that's all I've ever wanted. For you to find a way to be true to yourself and to the cause, without giving everything up. We've both been caught up in this whirlwind, but we don't have to destroy ourselves in the process. Malik felt a weight lift off his shoulders, a sense of relief he hadn't realized he needed. Brianna was right. They didn't have to be consumed by the fight. They could still make a difference, but they could do it in a way that honored who they were, who he was. I don't know what the road ahead looks like, Malik said, his voice more certain now. But I know one thing, I'm not giving up. I'm just finding a way to make sure I don't lose myself in it. Brianna nodded. That's all any of us can do. And we'll figure it out together. We've got this. The decision had been made. Malik knew there would still be challenges ahead, still moments where he'd question whether he was doing the right thing. But for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace with his choice. He had found a new path, one that was about balance, about understanding the importance of both the fight and the people he loved. As he walked away from the meeting with Brianna, Malik felt a sense of hope stir within him. The road ahead might be uncertain, but he wasn't alone on it anymore. The days after Malik and Brianna's conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter that wasn't about abandoning their beliefs or walking away from the fight, but about finding a different way to make a difference. They both knew that they couldn't keep pushing forward with the same reckless intensity. They needed to be strategic, to use their voices and their influence more wisely. Malik spent the next few days reflecting on everything he had learned so far. The anger, the protests, the clashes, it had all started as a cry for justice. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else, something darker, more chaotic. Now, Malik understood that true change wouldn't come from endless battles on the streets or from putting himself at constant risk. It would come from strategy, unity, and finding a way to reach the people who still didn't understand what was at stake. But he also knew that he wasn't alone in this. Brianna had become his rock, and together, they could find a way to change things, together, not alone. The two of them met at a local coffee shop later that week, away from the noise of protests and street rallies. Malik could feel the difference in the air, the sense of calm, as if they were about to make the most important decision of their lives. "I've been thinking," Brianna began, her voice steady as she took a sip from her coffee. "We've tried fighting in the streets, and it hasn't worked. The people who need to hear our message aren't listening, and we're just fueling the fire. But if we step back, if we try something different, maybe we can get through to them." Malik leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "What do you mean by something different?" Brianna's eyes sparkled with determination. "I mean, we need to go where the real power is. The media, the influencers, the people who have the ability to shift public opinion. If we change the narrative, if we show them the human side of the struggle, our side, we can build something that lasts." Malik thought about it for a moment, letting the idea sink in. It was a drastic shift from everything he had believed in. But Brianna was right. The constant fighting had only deepened the divide, and the more they pushed, the more they were met with resistance. Maybe this was the way forward, not by fighting harder, but by reaching deeper. "You're right," Malik said slowly, a smile tugging at his lips. "We can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. We need to reach the people who don't understand. We need to be strategic." Over the next few weeks, Malik and Brianna began to work on their plan. They reached out to local activists, people who had influence within their communities but had stayed away from the violent protests. They sought out those who could help them amplify their message without escalating the conflict. Slowly, the network they were building began to grow. One of their first steps was to hold a peaceful rally in the heart of the city. It wasn't going to be like the protests that had gone before. This rally was going to be about dialogue, about bringing people together to talk, not shout, about the issues that mattered. They gathered speakers from different backgrounds, activists, educators, even a few local business owners who were willing to speak up. They wanted to show the world that there was a middle ground, that the fight for justice didn't have to come at the expense of unity. Malik's role in all of this was crucial. He had become a symbol for the cause, but now, he had to transition from being a warrior on the front lines to being a leader with a vision. It wasn't easy. He had spent so long fighting that the idea of negotiating and speaking calmly felt foreign. But he knew it was the only way forward. The night before the rally, Malik and Brianna met at Brianna's apartment to finalize their plans. The air was thick with anticipation. Brianna was organizing the final details, coordinating with the speakers, ensuring the permits were in place, and getting the word out to the community. Malik, on the other hand, was pacing the room, his mind racing. What if the rally didn't work? What if people didn't show up? What if they faced more violence? Brianna noticed his unease and looked up from her phone. "You're overthinking it. This is the right step. We've already started changing the conversation." Malik stopped pacing and turned to face her. I know. It's just. I can't shake this feeling that if this doesn't work, we'll have failed. We'll have let everyone down." Brianna stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Malik, this isn't about perfection. It's about progress. If we can get even one person to see things differently, to understand our side, it's worth it. Don't you think?" Malik sighed, taking a deep breath. "Yeah, you're right. I just have to believe that it will work. That we can make a difference." "You already are making a difference," Brianna said softly. "We're doing this together. One step at a time." The day of the rally arrived, and Malik found himself standing in the middle of the crowd, watching as people gathered, one by one. He was nervous, but there was also a sense of hope rising within him. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid. He was ready to lead. The speakers took their turns, sharing their personal stories, their struggles, their dreams for a better future. And Malik, when his turn finally came, stepped up to the podium with a steady heart. He didn't shout. He didn't make any grand promises. Instead, he spoke about the importance of listening, to each other, to the community, to the people who were suffering. He spoke about finding common ground, about using their voices in ways that would build bridges, not walls. We've all been hurt, he said, his voice steady but filled with passion. But if we keep hurting each other, we'll never get the change we need. This fight isn't just mine or yours. It's ours. And we can only win by standing together, by lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. The crowd listened in silence. Malik's words seemed to resonate with them. They weren't ready to give up on the fight for justice, but they were ready to do it in a way that honored their shared humanity. When the rally ended, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. People hugged each other, exchanged numbers, and promised to keep the conversation going. The tension, which had hung over the city for so long, seemed to lift, if only for a moment. That night, Malik sat on the rooftop of his apartment building, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder that, despite everything, there was still hope. He had taken the first step on a new path, one that might not be easy, but it was the right one. Brianna joined him soon after, sitting beside him in comfortable silence. They didn't need to say much. The weight of the day was enough. We did it, Malik finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Brianna smiled, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Yeah, we did. The days that followed the rally were filled with a quiet kind of excitement. The city had been holding its breath, unsure of what to expect after the peaceful gathering. But as Malik and Brianna watched from the sidelines, they could see that the ripple effect of their efforts had begun to take shape in ways they hadn't imagined. The rally itself had been a success in their eyes, peaceful, impactful, and filled with a sense of unity. But what they hadn't expected was how it would spread like wildfire, fueling conversations not only in the community but also in the media. News outlets began to pick up the story, and Malik's name, once associated with chaos and protest, was now linked with a message of hope and dialogue. Malik woke up early the next morning to a flood of messages on his phone. They were from people he barely knew, from others who had attended the rally and even those who hadn't but had heard about it through word of mouth. Messages of support, gratitude, and admiration. Some were simply a few words of encouragement, "You made a difference." Others were longer, sharing personal stories about how the rally had inspired them to get involved, to be a part of something bigger than themselves. He sat on his bed, scrolling through the messages, a lump in his throat. He hadn't realized how much of an impact one peaceful rally could have, and yet here he was, the center of attention in a way he hadn't anticipated. The messages weren't all positive, of course. There were some who criticized him for not being more radical, for not taking a stronger stand. There were those who still believed the fight could only be won with violence and disruption. But Malik knew, deep down, that they were wrong. What they had started wasn't just about a moment, it was about creating lasting change. Later that afternoon, Malik met with Brianna to discuss what was next. They sat in their favorite coffee shop, a place they'd frequented since high school, and as usual, it felt like home. The familiar hum of conversation around them, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, it was comforting, like a small oasis amidst the chaos that had taken over their lives. "Did you see all those messages?" Malik asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. Brianna nodded, smiling. "Yeah, it's incredible. I didn't expect it to blow up like this, but maybe that's what we needed. We needed to show people that we're more than just angry voices. We're real people with real stories." Malik leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "It's overwhelming, though. I didn't ask for this kind of attention. I didn't expect people to look at me as some kind of leader. I just wanted to help. I know, Brianna replied, her tone soft but understanding. But you've already helped more than you realize. This is the beginning of something bigger. And I think you're ready for it. The weight of her words settled on Malik's shoulders. He had been so focused on the struggle, on the fight, that he hadn't truly thought about what it meant to lead, to be the face of a movement. It was humbling, but it also scared him. What if he didn't have what it took? What if he made a mistake that would set everything back? We've already come this far, Malik said, trying to sound confident. We can't go back. I need to know we're doing the right thing. I need to know that this isn't just a moment, that it's something real. Brianna placed her hand on his, offering a small smile. We're doing the right thing. And we'll keep doing it. Together. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effect continued to spread. The peaceful rally had ignited a spark, and now the fire was growing. Malik and Brianna were invited to speak at other community events, local schools, and even university campuses. Their message of unity and dialogue began to resonate with people who had previously been hesitant to get involved. For every skeptic, there were 10 others who were ready to listen, to take action. But with this newfound attention came a new set of challenges. Malik was contacted by local politicians who saw the potential in his message and wanted to align with his cause. Some of them were genuine in their desire for change, but others saw it as an opportunity to gain political favor. Malik was careful. He didn't want to be co-opted by anyone's agenda. He had learned the hard way that not everyone who claimed to support the cause was truly in it for the right reasons. One evening, as Malik and Brianna sat in their apartment, discussing the political pressure they were receiving, Malik voiced his concerns. I don't trust them, Malik said, frustration creeping into his voice. These politicians, they say they want to help, but I can't shake the feeling they're just trying to use us. Brianna nodded, her expression serious. I've been thinking the same thing. But we can't afford to turn our backs on every opportunity, either. We need to be smart about it. We need to find people who are genuinely on our side, people who will help us without trying to control us. Malik ran a hand through his hair, deep in thought. I guess the hard part is distinguishing who's real and who's just looking for a way to use this for their own gain. Brianna smiled faintly. You've got a good instinct for these things, Malik. You'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. As the weeks turned into months, Malik and Brianna continued to build their movement. They stayed true to their core message, justice, unity, and peace, but they had to be strategic. They began to see that real change wasn't just about getting people to show up at rallies. It was about changing hearts and minds, shifting the conversation, and finding ways to build long-term solutions. But the pressure was mounting. Malik had become a public figure, and with that came constant scrutiny. People who once supported him now questioned his every move. The media, once excited by his peaceful approach, began to shift their tone. Some outlets began to ask if he was too soft, too willing to compromise. Was he losing his edge? Was he abandoning the cause by seeking peace? Malik knew he had to find a way to navigate this new world he had entered. The fight for justice was far from over, but the path forward wasn't as clear as it once had been. He was no longer just a participant in the struggle, he was now its symbol, its representative. And that was a weight he hadn't fully prepared for. One evening, Malik found himself standing on the rooftop of his apartment, staring out at the city below. The lights were bright, the streets bustling with activity. The city had always felt like home, but now, everything seemed different. The skyline, once a symbol of ambition and hope, now felt distant, almost out of reach. You okay? Brianna's voice broke the silence. She joined him on the roof, her presence grounding him. Malik nodded, though his heart felt heavy. Yeah. Just thinking about everything. The weight of it all. Brianna stood beside him, looking out over the city as well. I get it. It's a lot. But we're doing this for the right reasons. And we've got each other. Malik turned to her, grateful for her unwavering support. "You're right. And we're not alone. We've got a whole movement behind us now. We just need to keep pushing forward, one step at a time." As Malik and Brianna stood together, overlooking the city they both loved, they knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But they also knew that their cause was worth it, that they were building something bigger than themselves, something that could change the world. And no matter what obstacles lay ahead, they were ready to face them together. The weeks following Malik's reflection on the city's skyline became a whirlwind of planning, organizing, and continuing to spread their message of peace and unity. But as they had learned, change wasn't something that happened overnight. For every step forward, there were moments of hesitation, doubt, and resistance. While Malik had become a well-known figure in the movement, it was increasingly clear that his leadership was being tested on multiple fronts. The peaceful rally had sparked a fire of hope, but the road to lasting change was proving to be longer and more complicated than either of them had anticipated. One afternoon, Brianna and Malik sat in a small conference room at a local community center, their eyes glued to the pile of papers before them. They had been working with local leaders, activists, and even a few influential business owners to continue their message. But the more they tried to create concrete solutions, policies for social justice, community outreach programs, educational initiatives, the more they realized just how deep the problems ran. Brianna, her brow furrowed in concentration, glanced up from her notes. "We've got so many plans, but no one's taking us seriously. We keep getting pushed to the back burner. Everyone loves the idea of change, but they don't want to do the hard work to get there." Malik sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know. It's like they hear what we're saying, but they don't listen. They only want the easy answers, not the ones that require real sacrifice." He looked up at Brianna, his eyes heavy with frustration. "And the people who are supposed to be allies? They're making it harder." Brianna nodded in understanding. "Politicians, media outlets, they all want to own the narrative now. Some are trying to paint us as too radical for not going further, others as too soft for choosing peace over violence. We're in the middle, and everyone's got their own agenda. It's exhausting." Malik leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had known that change would be a struggle, but he hadn't realized how complicated it would be to keep their message pure. They were no longer just a group of people calling for justice. They had become pawns in a larger game. That evening, Brianna and Malik found themselves back at their old hangout, the coffee shop where it all began. It felt like home, a place of quiet refuge from the pressures of the world outside. As they sipped their drinks in silence, Malik's mind wandered to the broader landscape of the movement. They had started this journey with the hope of creating lasting, systemic change. But now, more than ever, it felt like they were caught between too many forces that threatened to tear apart everything they had worked for. "I think we need to rethink our approach," Malik said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but the weight of his words hung heavily in the air. "We can't keep trying to please everyone. We need to go back to the core of why we started this. We need to remind people why they joined us in the first place." Brianna didn't answer immediately. She understood exactly what Malik meant. They had gotten lost in trying to appease politicians, the media, and various organizations. But in doing so, they had drifted away from the one thing that had united them in the beginning, the people, the community. "You're right," she said after a pause, her voice firm. "We can't let them dictate the narrative. We can't lose sight of the people who believed in us when we had nothing. Let's refocus on them." The next few days were filled with action. Malik and Brianna began reaching out to their grassroots network once again, activists, teachers, artists, small business owners, anyone who had been touched by their message. They organized meetings, town halls, and discussions to reinvigorate the core of their movement. It wasn't about big promises anymore, it was about real, everyday people who were making a difference in their communities without the need for recognition or political backing. It was clear that the path to true justice wasn't going to be fast or easy. It was going to be slow, incremental, and filled with hard decisions. They knew that to make a real impact, they needed to stay grounded in the values that had initially driven them forward. Malik walked into one of these meetings, a little more confident than he had been in weeks. The room was packed with familiar faces, people who had been part of their earliest efforts. The energy in the room was different now. There was a renewed sense of purpose, a shared commitment to the cause that transcended political agendas. He stepped up to the front, his voice calm but steady as he addressed the crowd. "We've come a long way," he began, his gaze sweeping over the room. "But the journey is far from over. We can't get distracted by the noise, by the media, by the politicians who want to use us for their own gain. We started this because we believe in justice. We believe in a future where everyone, regardless of who they are, has a fair shot." There was a murmur of agreement in the crowd. Malik could feel the weight of their shared purpose in the room. "We've been told that the path we've chosen is too slow, that we're not radical enough. But I disagree. Real change isn't about rushing through the process. It's about making sure that when we build something, it lasts. It's about making sure that the people we're fighting for are included in the conversation, in the decisions." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, making sure everyone understood. "This isn't just my movement. It's ours. And we're going to build it together, brick by brick." The applause that followed was heartfelt and enthusiastic. The room was full of people who had been through so much, and yet, they were still here, still fighting, still believing. And in that moment, Malik knew that they were on the right path. Brianna joined him at the front, her expression proud. She had been watching him, seeing how he had grown over the months. It wasn't just his words that had changed, it was the way he carried himself, the way he led without needing to dominate. "You did it," Brianna whispered as they stood together at the front of the room. Malik smiled, though there was a trace of exhaustion in his eyes. "We did it. We're not alone in this." As the meeting wrapped up and people began to disperse, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The movement was no longer about him, it was about the community. They had reignited the spark that had first brought them together, and now it was their collective strength that would carry them forward. But even as they celebrated this victory, Malik knew that the path ahead would be long. There were still those who wanted to see them fail, who believed that peace was weakness, and that true change could only be achieved through force. And there would always be challenges, both external and internal. But Malik was ready. He had learned over the past few months that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about staying true to your values, your purpose, and knowing when to listen to those around you. It was about doing the work, even when it didn't seem glamorous, and trusting that every step, no matter how small, was part of the larger journey. As Malik and Brianna stepped outside into the cool evening air, they exchanged a quiet glance. They had come so far, but they both knew the hardest battles were yet to come. But whatever came next, they were ready for it. Together. The days following the community meeting felt like a fresh start for Malik and Brianna. The momentum was undeniable. They had re-established their grassroots foundation and re-engaged with their community. It was clear that their message had resonated with people on a personal level. However, just as Malik had feared, the more they tried to bring their message of peace and unity to the forefront, the more they faced resistance from both unexpected and expected quarters. As they sat in their apartment one evening, reviewing their next steps, Malik's phone buzzed incessantly. He had been receiving a steady stream of messages from both supporters and critics, but tonight there was something different in the air. His phone displayed a notification from a major news outlet, a headline that made his stomach drop. "Is Malik's movement losing its edge? Some say it's becoming too weak." Brianna leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the headline. Her expression darkened. "They're questioning everything we've built." Malik sighed deeply, his frustration palpable. "This is what I was afraid of. The moment we start talking about real change, not just slogans, people start to lose interest. They don't want to hear about the hard work, about what it takes to make things happen. They want instant results. Brianna's voice was calm but firm. We can't let them define us. We know why we're doing this. We can't let the noise distract us. Malik nodded, grateful for her steadiness, but a sinking feeling remained. The media's critique, though harsh, wasn't entirely unfounded. The movement, which had once been loud and forceful, now seemed more thoughtful, more patient. It was a shift in tone that Malik knew was necessary, but the world outside didn't always understand the long game. The next day, Malik met with several key allies to discuss their next steps. Brianna was with him, offering her unwavering support as usual. They had brought together a small group of organizers and activists, people who shared their vision for a peaceful movement, but who also understood the reality of what was at stake. As the meeting began, Malik addressed the group with a sense of urgency. We've reached a critical point. Our message is getting diluted. The media, some of our allies, even certain parts of the community, they want us to make a choice, go bigger, go louder, or risk fading away into irrelevance. He paused, looking each of them in the eye. But we can't let that happen. We've chosen a path of real, lasting change. The problem is that the world isn't ready for that yet. They want things to change fast, but we know it's not that simple. So, what do we do? A long silence followed his question, each person deep in thought. Brianna was the first to speak up. We don't compromise. We stay the course. The world is full of loud voices, shouting over each other, but we need to remind people that lasting change doesn't happen overnight. And if we truly believe in what we're doing, then we have to trust that the right people will join us in time. Another activist, Marcus, leaned forward. But Brianna's right. We need to keep doing what we're doing, but we also need to find new ways to connect with the people who feel unheard. It's not enough to simply preach to the choir. We need to engage those who aren't already on board. Malik considered his words carefully. We've been doing that. We've been going to schools, speaking at town halls, having one-on-one conversations. But the problem is, people are tired. They're tired of hearing the same promises, tired of hearing the same words. They want action. So how do we show them that we're doing more than just talking? Over the next few weeks, the group worked tirelessly to come up with new initiatives. They began organizing community projects, such as neighborhood cleanups, free educational programs, and job training workshops. They knew that action spoke louder than words, and this was their chance to show the public that their movement wasn't just about ideals, it was about tangible change. At the same time, the pressure from the media and opposing political groups continued to mount. The media was relentless in their criticism, some even going so far as to call the movement outdated or soft. It was hard for Malik to avoid the negativity, it was everywhere he turned. But, as always, Brianna was there to ground him, reminding him of the bigger picture. You've built something, she said one evening after reading another critical article. You've built something real. You can't let them take that away from you. You have to stay true to your vision, no matter what they say. Malik, exhausted but resolute, nodded. I know. But it's hard not to feel like we're fighting an uphill battle. Change is always uphill. It's never easy. But we've come this far. And we're not stopping now. As Malik and Brianna continued to work on their community initiatives, they were met with small victories. People were beginning to notice the difference they were making, through their neighborhood cleanups, through their commitment to education, and through the support they were offering to those who needed it most. However, not everyone was pleased with their approach. There were still critics who claimed that their efforts were too small, too localized, and that they needed to take more radical steps if they wanted real change. Some even accused them of compromising their principles for the sake of political correctness. But Malik refused to let those voices derail them. He had come to understand that no matter how loud the opposition was, no matter how many people doubted them, the only way forward was to stay true to their values, values of unity, peace, and perseverance. One late afternoon, Malik was walking through a local park after a particularly tiring day of meetings and organizing. His phone buzzed again, and he checked the message. It was from an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "We're proud of you, Malik. Your movement is more important than you know." The message, simple as it was, felt like a breath of fresh air. Malik smiled to himself, grateful for the unexpected encouragement. As he walked, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. There was still so much to do. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, and they were facing tremendous opposition. But in this moment, Malik realized that no matter what, he was doing the right thing. They were doing the right thing. Back at their apartment later that evening, Brianna joined him at the kitchen table. "How's it going out there?" she asked with a raised eyebrow, sensing the shift in his mood. Malik sat down, a peaceful smile spreading across his face. "Better. I'm starting to realize something. Maybe we've been fighting the wrong fight all along. Not fighting against the critics, but fighting to stay true to what we believe in, no matter how hard it gets." Brianna raised her glass in a quiet toast. "To staying true to our purpose. No matter what." And so, Malik and Brianna pushed forward, knowing that the long road ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But with each step, they were building something that would stand the test of time. Something bigger than just a movement. Something that would change the world. The weeks that followed the small but significant victories in the community were a turning point for Malik and Brianna. Their movement had begun to pick up momentum again, and more people had started to rally behind their cause. But with the increasing support came a deeper, more complex question: could they continue to grow while staying true to their core values? As Malik sat at his desk one afternoon, reviewing proposals for more community outreach programs, Brianna walked in with a sense of urgency on her face. "Malik," she began, her voice strained, "I just got off the phone with someone who could change everything for us." Malik looked up, intrigued but cautious. Brianna wasn't one to make a big deal out of things unless they were truly important. "Who?" Malik asked, setting the papers down in front of him. "It's Karen Adams," Brianna said, her words heavy with significance. "You know her. She's been involved in social justice work for years, but now she's leading a major coalition of community organizers and political leaders. She's offering us an alliance. A partnership." Malik raised an eyebrow. He had heard of Karen Adams. She was known for her work with marginalized communities, but also for her pragmatic approach to activism. Her name carried weight in both political and social justice circles, and her ability to get things done was widely respected. But Malik wasn't sure. Could they really afford to align themselves with someone like Karen? Why now? What's she after? Malik asked, skepticism creeping into his voice. Brianna sat down across from him, her hands folded. "She's impressed with what we've accomplished so far. But more importantly, she sees the bigger picture. She believes our movement could be a major player in the national conversation about systemic change, and she wants to make sure it doesn't get swallowed by the noise. This could mean more funding, more visibility, and more resources for everything we've been trying to do." Malik paused. The offer sounded tempting. No one could deny that their movement could use more resources to achieve its goals. But something about it felt like a risk. They had always prided themselves on being independent, on not selling out to the establishment. Malik had seen too many movements co-opted by larger forces that had their own agendas. Would this be any different? "I get it," Malik said after a long pause, his voice thoughtful. "But we can't compromise. Not after everything we've been through. I don't want to find ourselves being used for someone else's agenda." Brianna nodded in agreement. "I know. I've been thinking the same thing. But this isn't just about us. It's about what we can do together. She's not trying to control us. She's trying to amplify what we're already doing." Malik stared at the papers on his desk, his mind racing. On the one hand, this could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for. But on the other hand, aligning with someone like Karen could bring unforeseen challenges. She was well connected, but her connections came with strings attached. Political maneuvering was never clean. "I'll meet her," Malik said finally, making a decision. "But we need to go into this with our eyes wide open. We need to be clear on what we're getting into." The meeting with Karen Adams took place the following week in a sleek, modern office building downtown. Malik and Brianna were nervous, but they had agreed to approach the meeting with an open mind. They were determined to stay true to their mission while exploring the possibility of working with someone who could help them elevate their efforts. Karen greeted them with a firm handshake and a warm smile. She was a woman in her late 40s, confident and composed. Her reputation as a strategic thinker was evident in the way she carried herself. She immediately led them into a spacious conference room where the meeting would take place. "I appreciate you both taking the time to meet with me," Karen began, offering them each a seat. "I've been following your work closely, and I have to say, I'm impressed with what you've been able to accomplish. The work you're doing, especially in the community, is invaluable." Malik exchanged a glance with Brianna before speaking. "Thank you, Karen. But I think we both know that we're at a crossroads right now. We're trying to figure out what comes next." Karen nodded. "I understand. And that's exactly why I'm here. The kind of change you're working toward, it's not something that can happen overnight, and it's not something that can happen alone. I've worked with dozens of activists and organizations, and I can tell you this, the work you're doing has the potential to be more than just a movement. It could be a movement with a national platform. It could be the catalyst for real political and social change." Brianna leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What exactly are you offering?" Karen's smile was measured. "I'm offering resources. Funding. A network of allies who can help get your message into the right spaces, political spaces, media spaces, and more. Together, we can make sure that the work you're doing gets the attention it deserves." Malik's mind was racing. He had seen what happened when powerful people like Karen tried to co-opt a cause, and he wasn't sure he was ready to risk it. But there was also something about her words that made him pause. This wasn't just about money, it was about influence. The kind of influence that could help them achieve their goals in a way that they couldn't do alone. "So, what's the catch?" Malik asked, not one to sugarcoat things. Karen's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. "There's no catch. But like any partnership, it comes with responsibilities. We'll work together to push for policy changes, bring media attention to the issues you care about, and advocate for legislative action. But in return, we need to work as a cohesive unit. There are political alliances that need to be formed, and compromises that will need to be made." Brianna exchanged a look with Malik. They both understood what she was implying. There would be compromises. Political compromises. But could they maintain their integrity while making those compromises? Malik sat back in his chair, deep in thought. He had always prided himself on being the kind of leader who didn't bend under pressure, but this was different. Karen wasn't offering them something trivial. She was offering them the means to effect real, large-scale change. "Let me think about it," Malik said, his voice steady. "This is a big decision, and we need to be sure we're making the right choice for the people we're trying to help." After the meeting, Malik and Brianna walked out of the building in silence. The weight of the decision was heavy, but neither of them knew what the right choice was. On the one hand, aligning with Karen could give them the tools they needed to make a real impact. On the other hand, they couldn't ignore the risk that came with involving powerful political players. Brianna broke the silence first. "What do you think?" "I don't know," Malik admitted. "It feels like we've been fighting to stay independent, to not get swallowed up by the system. But if we want to create lasting change, we might have to work within the system at times. The question is, can we do that without losing ourselves in the process?" Brianna nodded thoughtfully. "That's the million-dollar question." As they walked back to their apartment, the weight of the decision hung over them. They knew that whatever choice they made, it would shape the future of their movement. And they were about to step into a new chapter, one that would bring both opportunities and challenges in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Malik stood by the window of his apartment, staring out at the city below. The weight of the decision before him was heavier than anything he had ever faced. Brianna sat behind him, her eyes scanning the papers on the desk, but neither of them was truly focused. The phone call with Karen Adams had set everything in motion. It had provided them with an opportunity to elevate their cause in ways they had never imagined. But it had also forced them into a corner, where they had to decide whether they were willing to make compromises that could change everything about their movement. For the last few days, Malik and Brianna had gone back and forth. They discussed the implications of Karen's offer from every angle. They had talked to their closest allies, and even read through countless articles about the intersection of activism and politics. Every conversation seemed to lead to the same question: could they trust Karen? Could they trust themselves to hold on to their vision of change while navigating the world of political influence and power? Do you ever wonder if we're asking for too much? Brianna asked softly, breaking the silence. Malik turned to face her, his expression serious. What do you mean? Maybe we're asking for a purity that doesn't exist. We want everything to align with our values, and we want to change the system, but the system doesn't work that way. Maybe to really make a difference, we have to play by their rules. Maybe we've been too idealistic. Malik shook his head. I don't think we're being idealistic. I think we're being realistic. We've seen what happens when people compromise too much. They get lost in the system. They become a tool for someone else's agenda. And I don't want that. Brianna didn't say anything for a moment. She understood Malik's fears, but she also knew the truth of what she was saying. The world didn't always work in black and white. They couldn't just wish for change and have it happen. They had to navigate the gray areas, make difficult decisions, and sometimes take risks. I don't want to lose ourselves either, Brianna finally replied. But what if this is the way forward? What if we could use this opportunity to push the agenda we've always wanted, but from a place of power? Malik's eyes narrowed as he mulled over her words. Power always comes with strings. Karen's offer is tempting, but we can't ignore the reality. The people who control the resources, the influence, it's not all clean. And when you accept their help, you're agreeing to their terms. I know, Brianna said quietly. But maybe we can redefine those terms. Maybe we can change the way politics works, from the inside out. Malik exhaled sharply. You're talking about playing a dangerous game. I'm not sure we're ready for that. Brianna stood and walked over to Malik, placing a hand on his shoulder. I don't think we'll ever be ready for anything. But I think we're strong enough to handle whatever comes our way. The real question is whether we're willing to take the leap. Whether we believe in what we're doing enough to risk it all. Malik looked out the window again, the city lights flickering beneath him. He thought about the faces of the people they had helped, the families they had supported, the neighborhoods they had uplifted. He thought about the countless moments when he and Brianna had both believed, deep down, that they were on the right path. The road ahead was unclear, and perhaps they would never have the certainty they longed for. But in this moment, he knew one thing for sure: there was no going back now. I don't know what tomorrow will look like, Brianna, Malik said, his voice tinged with both resolve and uncertainty. But I do know this: we've built something from nothing. We've fought for every inch of ground we've gained. And we're not going to let anyone take that away from us. Not without a fight. Brianna nodded, her hand still on his shoulder. Then let's fight, Malik. Let's fight for the people who need us, for the future we want to build. But let's do it on our terms. The next morning, Malik called Karen Adams to set up a final meeting. He had made his decision. He was ready to take the leap, but only if he could ensure that their movement remained true to its mission. He wasn't going to allow Karen, or anyone else, to control their direction. If they were going to make this alliance work, they would have to negotiate the terms. The meeting took place in Karen's sleek office downtown, a far cry from the grassroots spaces Malik was used to. She greeted him with her usual composure, but this time, there was something different in the air. She knew that Malik's decision would be a turning point, and she had prepared herself for whatever direction he chose. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," Malik began as he sat down across from Karen. "And I've made my decision." Karen's expression remained neutral, but she leaned forward slightly. "Go ahead." "I'm willing to work with you," Malik said, his voice steady. "But on our terms. We need to retain complete control over our message. We need to stay independent in how we operate, even if we're part of a larger coalition. Our values, unity, community, and integrity, cannot be compromised. If we're going to move forward, it's because we're doing it our way, not because we're bowing to political pressures." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "I respect that, Malik. I've always known that you and Brianna weren't in this for the fame or the power. You want to make a difference. But let me be clear, there will be moments when we'll have to work together, even if our approaches don't always align perfectly. Can you handle that?" Malik's gaze was unwavering. "We can handle it. But we're not going to be anyone's pawn. We're going to continue doing the hard work, staying in the trenches, and we're not going to compromise on what we believe in." Karen leaned back, considering his words carefully. After a long pause, she spoke again. "I think we can work with that. Let's make it happen, Malik. But understand this, if we're going to do this, we're doing it as partners. No more, no less." Malik extended his hand, and Karen shook it firmly. The deal was made. As Malik walked out of the building, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The decision wasn't easy, but it was the right one. He had stood firm, and now they had a chance to take their message to a broader audience, to truly make the kind of change they had always dreamed of. But as he glanced over at Brianna, who was waiting for him outside, he knew that their real work had just begun. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles that would test their resolve, but Malik was ready. They had made it this far, and they weren't stopping now. Together, they would continue to fight, for the community, for the people, and for the future they were determined to build. And as they walked away from the building, side by side, they knew that this was only the beginning. The days after Malik and Brianna's decision to enter into an alliance with Karen Adams moved quickly. Their vision of activism had been irrevocably altered. But the more they thought about it, the more they realized that they had made the right choice. The partnership with Karen wasn't just about gaining resources and power, it was about finding new ways to channel their message, to make it louder, more impactful, and above all, more effective. The world was changing, and so were they. Malik and Brianna had always known that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They had always known that change didn't come without sacrifice, and now they were about to witness just how much of that sacrifice would test them, their ideals, and their movement. The political world was as ruthless as it was strategic, and now, they were officially part of that world. One afternoon, Malik sat at his desk in the office they had set up for their organization, scrolling through emails and proposals. The space was small but functional, nothing fancy. Their movement was still grassroots, still rooted in the community. It would always be that way, no matter how big they grew. Brianna walked in, holding a stack of files in her hands. Her expression was a mixture of frustration and resolve. "We need to talk." Malik didn't even look up from his screen. "About what?" "About the meeting next week with the city council," Brianna replied, dropping the files on the desk with a thud. "They've sent over the terms. They want us to endorse a new housing project. It's part of Karen's coalition deal. They say it's a step forward, but it feels like a step backward. It's the same old gentrification model they've always pushed." Malik's fingers stopped typing, and he finally turned to face Brianna. He could feel the tension building in the room. "I knew this was coming. I knew we'd have to make these kinds of choices, but it's different when you're in the thick of it." Brianna sat down across from him, running a hand through her hair. I know. It's not just the housing project, it's the fact that the more we get involved in these political negotiations, the more we start to feel like we're becoming part of the system we've been fighting against. Malik exhaled sharply, the frustration evident in his eyes. I don't want that. But Karen's right about one thing, we need to be in the room. If we're going to make any real change, we need to be at the table, not on the sidelines. But I don't want to compromise on our values. Brianna stared at him for a long moment before speaking again. But is it really worth it? Is being at the table worth the compromise? The system is designed to keep people like us from having real power. They'll use us, manipulate us. It's all so transactional. Malik's gaze hardened. I didn't join this fight to be used, Brianna. I'm not going to let that happen. But if we walk away now, what does that say? We're not giving up. We're not letting the fight die. We're just trying to be strategic. If we play it right, we can make some real changes from the inside. Brianna shook her head, looking unconvinced. I hear what you're saying, but it's hard to see how we can play it right when everything around us feels so wrong. I just don't want to lose what we've built. Malik stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline. His thoughts were swirling. He knew Brianna was right to be cautious. They had worked too hard to build their credibility and their community ties. Was it possible to walk the line between political influence and the integrity of their message? Would they be able to keep their voice, or would they be drowned out by the voices of those who only cared about power? After a long silence, Malik spoke. We won't lose ourselves, Brianna. Not if we stay true to why we started this. But if we want to make a difference, we can't just talk about it from the outside. We have to be willing to get our hands dirty. Brianna nodded slowly, her expression softening. You're right. It's hard to see the bigger picture when you're in the middle of it. Malik smiled, though the weight of his words still hung heavy in the air. I know. But that's why we have to keep each other grounded. We've got a lot more to do, but we're in this together. The day of the city council meeting arrived sooner than Malik and Brianna had expected. The tension between their desire to remain true to their roots and the temptation to make a larger impact had never been more palpable. They arrived early, walking into the cavernous council chamber with a sense of purpose. The room was buzzing with anticipation. People were lining up to speak, politicians exchanging pleasantries, and lobbyists mingling in the back. It was a world Malik had only ever observed from the outside, and now he was a part of it. As they took their seats at the front, Karen Adams walked in, looking composed as always. She nodded at them from across the room, and Malik caught her eye, giving her a curt nod in return. This was it. The moment where they would either make their mark or lose their voice entirely. Welcome, Malik, Brianna, Karen said, sitting down beside them. Ready for the big day? Malik didn't respond immediately. He was still processing everything, but Brianna gave a tight-lipped smile. We're ready, she said, her voice a little more confident than she felt. The meeting began, and the council members started discussing various agendas, the room filled with formalities. But when it was finally time for the new housing project to be presented, the room fell silent. Karen stood and introduced the proposal, presenting it as a solution to the city's growing housing crisis. It was a slick, well-rehearsed pitch, one that seemed to promise the world, while hiding its true costs. Malik leaned forward, his mind racing. This was the moment where they would make their stand. The project would provide new homes, but at what cost? It would displace families, gentrify neighborhoods, and further the divide between the wealthy and the working-class communities they had fought so hard to protect. When the council asked for feedback, Malik stood, his voice steady but filled with conviction. We cannot support this project as it stands. It doesn't serve the community, it serves the interests of those who profit from displacement. We need affordable housing, yes, but we need it in a way that respects the people who already live here. This project, as it is, will not do that. A murmur ran through the room as Malik's words settled in the air. Brianna stood beside him, her presence strong. This was the fight they had been preparing for, the fight for integrity, for their values, for the people they had promised to serve. Karen's face was unreadable, but Malik could sense her frustration. This was not the direction she had wanted the conversation to go. But there was no turning back now. As the meeting continued, the room grew more divided. Some council members sided with Malik, others with Karen's proposal. But Malik knew that even if they didn't win today, they had made their point. They had shown the city that their voices were powerful, and they would not be silenced by the allure of power or money. By the end of the meeting, the project was postponed, pending further negotiations. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a start. Malik and Brianna left the council chamber with a renewed sense of purpose. They had stepped into the heart of the system and had spoken their truth. And no matter what came next, they had made it clear that they weren't going anywhere. As they walked back to their office, Malik glanced at Brianna. "We're still here. We've still got work to do." Brianna smiled. "And we always will." Together, they stepped into the future, knowing that the road ahead would be challenging, but also filled with possibility. They had found their place, and they had found their voice. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?